America. Welcome to your Thursday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head, reporting to you from Los Angeles, California. My amazing co-host, John Solomon, remains on assignment and has plans to return early next week. So at this time, I'm going to take over his role and bring you up to speed with everything that has taken place so far today on Capitol Hill and in Washington, D.C. So starting with last night, shortly after we got off the air, House Republicans and Democrats came together to approve the $80 billion tax relief for American Families and Workers Act 2024. Now, this legislation is set to expand the child tax credit and restore research and development deductions among creating low-income housing credits. Now, while bipartisanship is rare on Capitol Hill, of course, the United States Senate now needs to decide whether or not they're going to come together to pass the legislation, or if they're going to alter the text and compromise a little with the lower chamber before sending it to Joe Biden's desk. So later this hour, we're going to be catching up with Brandon Arnold of the National Taxpayers Union to discuss what the U.S. Senate might do and how this tax package could affect you. Nevertheless, if you tuned in last night, you would have heard Congressman Ralph Norman push back on the legislative measure. Not only did he say that the bill carried provisions that provide expansion of welfare to illegal immigrants, but it could cost taxpayers roughly $1.5 trillion over the next decade. So meanwhile, also taking place last night on the floor of the House, over two-thirds of House Democrats voted against another bipartisan measure that, if enacted, could result in immigrants living in the U.S. illegally be deported for a DUI conviction. Despite the liberal opposition, this bill is now headed to the U.S. Senate. Now, in some other news, this time from the Pentagon, Secretary Lloyd Austin apologized for concealing his cancer diagnosis and hospitalization. Take a quick look at the beginning of his press conference that took place just an hour ago.
I'm deeply grateful to my doctors and the nursing staff at Walter Reed, and I very much appreciate all the good wishes. But I want to be crystal clear. We did not handle this right, and I did not handle this right. I should have told the president about my cancer diagnosis. I should have also told my team and the American public. And I take full responsibility. I apologize to my teammates and to the American people.
And the secretary went on to say that the news shook him and referenced how it shakes many within the Black community. Nevertheless, he said that his first instinct was to keep it private, while keeping things to yourself would be appropriate. In some cases, it's certainly not when you are serving in a cabinet position that oversees our entire Defense Department, which entails more than 2 million civilian employees and over 1 million troops. But regardless of the circumstance, we do hope that Secretary Austin continues to recover. Now, meanwhile, back on Capitol Hill, pressure is mounting on Biden to issue executive orders to address the border crisis after he rescinded many Trump-era border executive orders upon taking office. Democrats like Correa of California and Gonzales of Texas have both openly criticized Biden's open border in their own way, and even the White House Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton acknowledged that there are steps that Biden can take on his own, but he's holding out for congressional leaders to make a deal and pass it on to his desk, because, you know, that's what real leaders who want to actually see change do. I'm glad that he finally saw the light on this. I don't know. Joining us now to talk about the latest in the impeachment markup of Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and the showdown between states and the federal government is Mark Morgan, who served in the Trump administration as the acting commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Commissioner, welcome back on the show. Thank you for being here on such short notice. We appreciate you being here.
Amanda, thanks for having me.
Sir, I want to start with something that I saw this morning on social media, and I find that in the mornings it's not a good thing for me to immediately go on Twitter because for whatever reason, the way God made me, I wake up combative. But I saw this video and I was apoplectic. It was illegal immigrants in New York. There was a video released of these same people a few days ago, brutally assaulting 2 New York police officers. So these illegal immigrants were arrested. They went to jail. Guys, if we could get that VO on the screen. They were arrested. They were then released without bail. This is them getting released, and they are flipping the bird to the cameras. But, I mean, essentially, aren't they just flipping the bird to the American citizens?
Amanda, look, you took the words right out of my mouth. Let's make sure we put this fully in context. First, they entered their first act of entering this country was enter a country illegally in violation of law. And then once they're here, we gave them free education, free health care, free housing. What did they do while they were in here receiving the benefit? They committed another crime. And then you're just displaying what their reaction is. But here's what's important. This is not surprising to me. And why I'm glad that this is getting a lot of attention. What you saw, the violence against the police officers, that's just a microcosm. Look, illegal aliens are claiming American victims every single day in here. The last 36 months, as an example, the CBP has apprehended over 90,000 criminals trying to come into our country. Amanda, 90,000, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members. That's who they've apprehended. Now, let's think about the 1.8 million known Godwin. So the past 36 months, untold numbers of murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and aggravated felons have now the United States called home. And just briefly, real quick, even those that we apprehend, the countries that come from 180 different countries, we have no ability to actually vet them properly and get to know and understand what their criminal history is from their home country, yet we are processing them and releasing them in the United States, and this is the end result.
Well, and you pointed out something that I think is so important to recognize. You know, this was very public, a lot of exposure for this video. It obviously went viral on social media because it was two New York City police officers. But make no mistake, this happens, as you just pointed out, every day to American citizens, to private citizens, whether it's assault, whether it's battery, whether it's theft. This happens all the time. And by the way, it happens to illegal immigrants who are trying to make their way here because they get raped and murdered along the way. They're trafficking children. They're trafficking drugs. Democrats say it's humanitarian. I can't see how in any of this, it's actually humanitarian to let them come here.
And man, you're absolutely right. I could have said it better myself. Look, there's actually an organization in the United States called APIAC, American Victims of Illegal Alien Crime. Think about that. There's so much crime committed by illegal aliens that we have an organization of family members who have survived and watched their loved ones killed at the hands of someone that shouldn't be in this country. Let me give you another quick stat. From 2011 to 2023, 287,000 illegal aliens committed over 490,000 crimes, including hundreds of murders, rapes, assault, kidnapping, the list goes on. And that, the mic drop, is the state of Texas alone. So don't tell me that illegal immigration is a victimless crime and it has no downside, because that's a lie.
Yeah. And I'm starting to find it hard to believe that Republicans really want anything to be done, because the House Homeland Security Committee, of course, did approve articles of impeachment against Mayorkas, which is great. But they left town today without taking them to the House floor. Does this really require a full floor whipping operation?
It shouldn't. Amanda, we've had 3 years of Secretary Mayorkas, who has abdicated his oath, abused his authority, lied to the American people in Congress under oath. He has violated the law. He's refused to enforce the law, and he's rewritten the law to his definition of what it should be, circumventing Congress. He's been the chief architect of the worst border security crisis in our lifetime that's jeopardized every aspect of our nation's safety and national security. And Chairman Mark Green, he didn't do what the Democrats did on one phone call and go right to. He conducted 7 months of hearings, produced countless witnesses, and over 400 pages of testimony that clearly outline the dereliction of duty of Secretary Mayorkas and why he should be impeached. I agree with you. This should have been an easy yes to vote on the House and push the Senate. Hopefully, it's going to happen in the next week.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes taking that high road, I feel like they're so high they don't have any oxygen left, and it is affecting the way that they legislate. I wanted to ask you about 2 other pieces of legislation that were very concerning. The first one was one that dealt with deporting illegal immigrants who have DUI convictions, and a number of Democrats voted against that. And then there was a separate provision as far as deporting immigrants who have stolen Social Security benefits of seniors. 155 Democrats voted against that one. Do Democrats have a leg to stand on when they say that they actually care about the safety of American citizens?
No, look, man, think about this. First of all, why do we need another law? The law's already here, right? If you have entered the country illegally, or you remain in the country illegally, and you commit another crime, the law is already there. You should be removed. I mean, look, common sense. It just tells you if you're in our country illegally and you commit another crime, that no, it depends on the severity of the crime, and it depends on one's own ideologic driven severity of the crime. PUI, the last time I checked, kills over 10,000 Americans every single year. And this president has said that it really doesn't matter. I'd like to think to all the family members who have lost individuals to drunk drivers that it doesn't matter, that it's not important. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's just like New York you brought up. They assault police officers and they're released. That's incredible. They should have been handed over to ICE immediately, and they should already be in the process of being removed. And yet the Roman streets flipping off America. But that's happening every single day across this country. That's unconscionable.
Yeah. It's unconscionable, and it also seems like, Republicans want money for the border. They want, I don't know if they ever have intentions of building a border wall, at least while we have a Democrat in the White House, but just money to fortify, to provide to Border Patrol, to help them with their operations. It certainly seems like, though, for the White House and for Joe Biden, anytime there is an injection of cash, it doesn't go to securing the border. It goes to processing. Does that seem like the reality to you as well?
Yeah, Amanda, you're absolutely right. In fact, the $14 billion supplement, the overwhelming majority of that $14 billion or $12 billion is going to go to NGOs and, just as you said, to process and not actually secure the border. And let's not fall into the trap that some of these Republicans are as far as resources. Yes, we need resources, but that's not what's causing the problem here. What's causing the problem here is policy. We don't need to throw more Border Patrol agents, because all they're going to do is go and help facilitate processing and releasing faster. We need a change in policy to secure our border.
Yeah, Commissioner, I know how much you love this country, and I know how much you care about the men and women who protect our southern border, and you probably stay in contact with them as well. What's the morale of them right now, and do they feel like if Secretary Mayorkas is impeached, that will have any type of positive benefit?
I'm not sure that they think necessarily it's going to have a positive benefit. The secretary is going to be because, again, it's still President Biden's overall strategy that's driving it. But here's what I am hearing, though, is but there should be still accountability, right? And part of this, by going through to Mayorkas, is it's been able to get this in the forefront and really, I think, awaken the country, including those people that just don't understand why a strong border security matters and why this president's strategy is jeopardizing our country's safety and national security. But I can tell you, the morale, the Border Patrol, what I'm hearing is the low it's ever been since inception in 1924. Amanda, they know every single day that they're not able to do the job that they signed up for, the job that they're willing to sacrifice everything, including their life, to secure, defend, and protect our borders. They know under this administration, they're not allowed to do it. And they know that every single day that criminals, drugs, and national security threats are getting past them because they're not able to do their job under Secretary Mayorkas.
It's absolutely heartbreaking, and I know that they are doing the best that they can with what they have, but my goodness, they need help. 911 SOS. Good gracious, November couldn't come soon enough. Mark Morgan, we love having you on. Thank you so much for your very important perspective. We're going to have you back on again very soon. All right, everybody, I'm off to a quick commercial break. Be sure to check out the latest news headlines over on justthenews.com, and I'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, everyone. Earlier today, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin apologized for concealing his cancer, touting his inaction and lack of communication as a mistake. Now, this comes just days after the announcement that 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in the drone attack on a U.S. military outpost in Jordan. Now, President Biden is expected to issue an executive order that would set the ground for imposing sanctions on Israelis accused of engaging in violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. Seems like under Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin, foreign policy can only be described as frenetic. So joining me now to explain the worldly chaos and to help decipher what our strategy should be is Dr. Waleed Phares, a nationally known foreign policy expert who has consulted for Republican presidential candidates and authored his latest book, Iran. Dr. Waleed Phares, so great to have you back here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me. Always a pleasure to be back on your show, The News.
Likewise, we love having you. And, as I reflect on the foreign policy of the last administration compared to this one, this is the visual I get. Donald Trump had a grenade launcher on his shoulder. Everybody could see it. Everyone knew it was there, but he never had to use it. The mere presence of it, the aggression, the strength, the willingness to use it if necessary to protect America and put her interests first. It was ubiquitous, and it was well known globally, but particularly with America's enemies. Joe Biden, on the other hand, he's got a potato gun that he just keeps pew-pewing. He just keeps firing off chunks of Idaho's finest, and no one respects any of his foreign policy one bit. Am I wrong?
Absolutely not. The Biden administration, on top of that, has a microphone, and they keep beaming towards the foes, the enemies, the challengers, the Iran regime, the Taliban, maybe behind that, the radicals, China, North Korea. They keep beaming that they're not going to counter these activities. They have delisted the Houthis. Remember, we had that discussion first year on arrival. And look what the Houthis are doing. They have disarmed the Afghanistan government that we have trained for many, many years and rearmed the Taliban, gave them Afghanistan. They have been paying money to the Iran regime. All these messages are encouraging the other side, Amanda, to do what they are doing. That's why there is a feeling among the rulers of the Iran Islamic Republic, other jihadists, Hamas, Hezbollah, that this administration is not going to stop them. So what do? They attack. They attack everywhere, including, of course, in Gaza against Israel and in the Red Sea. Our foreign policy is like a train going fast towards something very deep at the end of the valley.
Yeah, I don't even want to know is what's at the end of those tracks. So if you had maybe 10 minutes to sit in front of President Biden, I know that it would take a lot longer than that to actually piece through all of the nuances of this conflict. But if you had a chance to sit down in front of him, what would you advise him to do? Because I know under President Trump, you know, the threat of no negotiations, no talks, all of that stops, no more money. That is how President Trump did it. Would you recommend the same thing for Joe Biden?
Look, if I have this chance and they're serious about it, they really want to they have to change the current policy. And if they do so, then I'll be more than happy to summarize what would be, that's very modestly, directions to stop Iran. He has 1 year at this point in time, and a year very difficult because it's a presidential election. So number one, the very first thing a President Biden should do is to tell the Iranian leadership in public, not in secret, not discreetly, I am stopping all negotiations, all talks about the Iran deal, all of it. If he does this will create a panic in the leadership. And number two, I'm stopping all transfer of money. And number three, and that's probably my signature here and some other experts, shut down the Syria-Iraq border. This is where Iran is coming from to threaten Iraq and Syria and Israel and, of course, Lebanon. These are four things. His advisors are very aware of them, and he will have to make that decision. The problem is that he has been bound by the Iran deal and that transaction.
Yeah. Well, when you have Robert Malley, the guy who spearheaded JCPOA, now got a cushy job at Yale teaching, it's a little bit of mixed messaging from this administration. I wanted to ask you about your recent op-ed. The U.S. has a very powerful military arm, but a weak policy under this administration. You articulated much better than I do, but I call it the Klondike bar foreign policy. It's when you've got a hard shell on the outside, but it's super squishy and soft underneath. Can you expound on your piece?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm getting questions, not just from people in national security and the public here, but around the world. And the question I quote, especially in the Arab world, in Israel, in Saudi, in Egypt, what's wrong with that policy? They are asking, I mean, even the rules of engagements, any basic rules of engagement, when you are attacked, you counterattack. If you are attacked again, you eliminate the source of these attacks. That's not what our policy is now, neither in Syria or Iraq or Yemen and other places. Why? Our military is very, very powerful. You know, I was engaging with many of those spokespersons of the Houthis and the Iranian militias. They know that if the United States wants to eliminate the Houthi threat, it wouldn't take more than 3 days for the strategic weaponry system. Same goes for Iraq, same goes for Syria. For Iran, it's a different story. The reason is our weakness is not in our military. Our weakness is in our political decision-making here in Washington, D.C. And that weakness is terrible because it's inspired by interest, by financial interest. That's why there are lobbies, very powerful pro-Iran regime lobbies who pressure the Biden administration and stop them from actually giving the orders to the Pentagon, to the agencies, to end that attack against the United States, let alone what's happening with Israel.
Yeah. Absolutely spot on. I am concerned about what's to come, though. Iran has threatened to decisively respond to any U.S. reaction to that deadly attack on our troops in Jordan. Would they dare?
They would, depending on what is the situation inside America. I've been following the way of thinking of this of the leadership of the Iranian Republic, Islamic Republic, for 33 years at least. And my concern now, as I'm now focusing, like you are, all of us, not just on the Middle East, on what's happening in this country. You mentioned the influence of Iran propagandists inside our bureaucracy. We saw what happened with those protests, that they could turn violent if Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood and all the radicals decide. But the biggest wound, I'm a foreign policy guy, but the biggest wound is our southern border. What has been happening on our southern border, and finally the FBI now is admitting, the leadership of the FBI, that what we have seen going through these borders is very, very bad news. And the possibility that the terrorists or jihadi terrorists would engage in some massive action against us, like Hamas has done in the Negev, is really becoming serious at this point in time. That would be my maximum concern.
Yeah, it is all just an utter mess. But you tweeted out something that I think is really interesting, and I want you to expound on it. You said Tehran's regime is playing hit and run with the U.S. They hit our troops in our bases, and then they run by ceasefire as the U.S. prepares a counterstrike. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is receiving their orders. Can you explain that?
Oh, absolutely. This is at the heart of the strategy. I have actually lectured about it to our defense and security agencies for many years, because we have analyzed this stuff for the last 28 years, 30 years. So this is what they do. They launch attacks and then trigger a counterattack. And when the counterattack starts, what do? They rush to scream, ceasefire, ceasefire. And if we don't stop it or offer them a ceasefire, then they will claim we are the aggressors. That's exactly the scenario of Hamas attacking Israel. They waited 3 days. And when the Israelis started their counterattack, they went all over the place. They had everybody prepared. 1 million flags of the protesters were already printed. Imagine, this is all serious organization. And they said, you are the aggressors, and now they blame Israel. The same thing we've done in Syria and Iraq. Our forces were attacked. When we start to counterattack, you have full-fledged mobilizations through media, through all the means they have. So that tactic is used constantly, on the one hand by the Iran regime, and it has been used even before by the Muslim Brotherhood militias all the way to Al-Qaeda. Hit and run and then scream ceasefire.
You're exactly right. Sir, before we go, you mentioned Israel, so I want to zoom in on that for a moment. If there was one message from the Biden administration that could completely squash their conflict with the Palestinians, what would that be?
Well, Hamas will have to be dismantled. There is no doubt about it. But immediately after that, we need to replace the jihadi leaders, the corrupt leaders of the Palestinian community. They have the right for life. They have the right to be happy. And then make a choice. Either Gaza will become a Kandahar in Afghanistan, or Gaza has the potential of becoming a Dubai. They have to choose. The Abraham Accord should be implemented in Gaza among the Palestinians, and that will bring real peace.
Yeah, I certainly hope that at some point the Biden administration will listen to voices like yours, because we certainly need it. Sir, I want to ask you about your most recent book. It's out. Where can people find it?
Everywhere on Amazon, all the book sites. But if you want it to be signed by me, just send me a message on my social media at Walid Phares. You have to spell it right. WALID, my first name, Phares, PHARES, at Walid Phares.
I love that. Everybody, you can see his name down there on the screen. So you have a direct line to Dr. Phares. How special. Absolutely. All right, Dr. Phares, thank you again so much for making the time with us tonight. You have an uncanny way of picking all of this apart, and it's so valuable to our program. We'll have you back on again very soon.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you.
All right, everybody, don't go anywhere, because when I come back, Eric Pratt of the Gun Owners of America is going to be here to break down John's exclusive news story and discuss how the Biden administration is looking to mandate self-storage for firearms. Oh, look, going outside of the law again. Lots to come from that conversation, so stay here, and we'll be back on the other side of these messages. Welcome back, America. If you've been paying attention to justthenews.com in the last 24 hours or so, then you would have seen an article published by John that reveals a whistleblower who came forward to the same group that represents the IRS agents in the Hunter Biden case, telling them that the Biden administration is preparing an unconstitutional power grab to regulate private gun sales by requiring a background check. Now, in a detailed letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland, Empower Oversight said that they had learned from two sources that the Bureau, the ATF, were directed by the White House to make the change. But shouldn't it be Congress who makes changes to the laws? Yeah, it should be. Specifically, the one passed in 1986 that explicitly forbade background checks for gun sales between private individuals. So let's dive into this conversation with none other than the Senior Vice President of the amazing Gun Owners for America organization. Eric Pratt joins us now. Eric, you're caught up on all this news. You know, what's insane about this to me is that I think that for folks who don't necessarily pay attention, they think, well, you know, we already require background checks. What's the big deal? The big deal is that a private citizen doesn't have access to run a background check. This isn't, you know, you're not talking about a law enforcement individual who, allowed by law, can run a background check when there's just cause. This is a private citizen. So this effectively squashes any private gun sales, does it not?
Yeah, it is stunning what this rule requires. And by the way, this is something that Gun Owners of America was on top of last November and December, and we generated 85,000 comments from the public against this. But you're absolutely right how breathtaking this is. This backdoor registry will require virtually every person who sells a gun to become a licensed gun dealer, or else they go to jail. And virtually every person who buys a gun, even privately, will have to register the sale with the federal government. Again, failure to do so means jail time. Now, you know, clearly Biden is to blame here for this, but you also have to blame Republicans like John Cornyn of Texas and Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, because they voted for the gun control law in 2022 that Biden is now using, really unduly expanding, but he's using it to register virtually every transfer of a firearm in the country. And it's interesting, the Biden administration has described this rule as moving the U.S. as close to universal background checks as possible without additional legislation. So again, that means virtually every person who buys a gun will need to fill out a 4473 form, and the individual who sells the gun is going to have to keep that form in his home or at it, you know, wherever, until it gets turned into the ATF. So again, we're talking about gun owner registration, and historically, that's the first step to gun confiscation.
Yeah. And you know, what's very scary about this to me is that if you're paying attention to all of the pieces that are moving on the game board, I think that there's an element to this with respect to what appears to be a move towards a cashless society. Because I think that the only way around this, I mean, the only way that they enforce this is preventing even cash sales of this. Because, I mean, you sell your gun to your neighbor, a law-abiding citizen, and you as a law-abiding citizen sell that gun to them for cash, you're not going to run a background check. So how would they even enforce it?
Well, you're right. If we do go to a cashless system, then yeah, they will be able to enforce it that way. You know, pretty soon we'll just have to resort to trading sheeps or dogs for firearms. I mean, that's, you know, that's the direction this is going. But this is Big Brother at its worst. And, you know, again, we cannot overemphasize how dangerous this is. The ATF has accumulated. This is something that we found through Freedom of Information Act requests, that now they're up to 1 billion, almost a billion of these gun records being recorded. And as you pointed out earlier, that violates federal law. They're still doing it anyway. And this is just another step in that registration process, where now they even want to get all the private transactions.
Oof. I live in the city. I don't even have sheep to sell, so I would have to start bartering with my shoes or something. I don't even know what I could even offer on that front. So as you mentioned at the top of the block, and this is something that we know about you and your organization, you guys do stay on the forefront of all of this. You learn about this stuff early. You start getting petitions. You start taking legal action. What are some of the things that you are starting to catch wind of that you're already moving down that legal route with?
Well, yeah, we are very busy in the courts. we've been involved challenging the bump stock ban, and that is now going to the Supreme Court. And so we're involved in that case with an amicus brief. We were involved in the case that just yesterday broke. A federal district judge in California ruled against California, saying that their background check law for ammunition is unconstitutional. Kudos to the California Rifle and Pistol Association. They were the lead group in that fight. But let me just say, California's arguments in that case were embarrassing. The state was asked to give historical examples at the time of the founding that would justify background checks on ammunition. But you know what California did? They didn't give examples of, say, a gunsmith, checking with the sheriff in 1790 to make sure that a gun buyer is not a criminal. No, what California presented were racist laws that prevented the sale of firearms to persons of color, to Indians, mulattoes, Negroes. That's the language of the laws that they're appealing to. So when all is said and done, what has California just admitted? Gun control was racist, is racist, and will always be racist. Kudos to the district judge for calling them out on this.
Yeah, well, that certainly wouldn't be the first time that those words, California and embarrassing, bump up against each other in a sentence. I wanted to ask you about what took place last year, SHOT Show in Las Vegas, one of the best conferences or conventions across America. I am dying to get there someday. Hopefully that will work out. But I know you guys, did I say last month? Last week. I know that you guys did a spoof of what's happening with the ATF and their overreach of power, their flex on that. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown about that?
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say that the show was great. There was tremendous energy and enthusiasm. Really, we had more people come visit the GOA booth than ever before in any year. A lot of people dropped by our booth just to say thanks, because we secured a preliminary injunction last year against the ATF, which prevented them from enforcing Biden's pistol brace ban against our members. So that means at no time did any GOA member have to destroy or register their pistol brace firearms, which was truly great news. But to the spoof that you were talking about, we got a clandestine video of the ATF's booth there at the SHOT Show. It was real fun, kind of taken through some leaves. So we had a fake journalist appearing like she was reporting, from the Serengeti in Africa, saying that, we have spotted the greatest known predator of gun owners. And, this is a dangerous species known as the ATF. And then the video ends saying that Gun Owners of America is combating this evil predator, gives example of how we're doing this in the courts. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. Sure got a lot of likes and shares on social media.
That sounds amazing. I love that. And I'm going to make sure that I retweet that out for everyone to look at. I wanted to kind of bridge the gap between gun ownership and voting. For a lot of folks, we are looking at this 2024 election coming up in November, and the prospects of a second term for Joe Biden. A little bit scary. Scott Presler, who is a Republican activist who gets out there and gets people registered to vote and has been, flipping registration left and right. He put out a statistic not long ago regarding, and I think this one was specific to Wisconsin, but it was somewhere between 20 and 30% of gun owners in Wisconsin, I do believe it was, are not registered to vote. So he has started setting up a voter registration booth at gun shows. Do you think that's something that could produce promising results for Republicans who tend to be on the side of gun ownership?
That is crucial. Gun owners have to be registered to vote. Absolutely. And one of the things that we do to help gun owners is that we plan to produce a candidate rating for every race in the country. And that rating will be posted on our website at gunowners.org. In the past, voters have used that rating to guide how they vote and basically to hand out pink slips to legislators who've betrayed our rights. I'll give you a great example of that. In 2021, when more than 100 Republicans voted for a red flag provision, voters went to the polls the following year and held many of them accountable. 78% of the Republicans who lost their primary elections in 2022 were Republicans who voted for that red flag gun confiscation provision. So that's how we elect a pro-gun House and Senate. It's one election at a time. And the key is to empower voters with information as they go to the polls. We're not going to make excuses for legislators. We let the chips fall where they may, and we give them an honest rating.
I love it. I mean, we give congressional ratings on tax policy, on pro-life issues. There absolutely should be this. And we're so glad that you guys facilitate that. Eric, we are delighted to have you join us again. It's been too long, my friend. John kept asking when we were going to be back. And I guess with him gone, we're going to have you back on when he is here, which will be next week. So thank you so much for joining us. And don't go anywhere. Brandon Arnold is going to be joining us next to talk about that big tax bill that passed in the U.S. House late last night. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. Just after 8 o'clock last night in the House of Representatives, they suspended the rules in order to pass the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act of 2024, which would expand the child tax credit to $3,600 per child from the current $2,000 per child. It's also going to create low-income housing credits and restore research and development deductions. Now, keep in mind that this bill provoked frustrations from moderate New York Republicans due to exclusion of state and local tax provisions. However, the House Rules Committee heard those provisions separately this morning. Now, it's up to the U.S. Senate to pass the bill. However, as it stands right now, it doesn't quite seem like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is eager to take this bill up. So joining us now to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of this legislation is Brandon Arnold. He is the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Brandon, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. All right. I want to pick apart some of the provisions in this bill. Now, I know it's going to be paid for by funded by the Employee Retention Act relief from COVID. But the price tag on it is supposedly $80 billion. But to play the devil's advocate here, we had Freedom Caucus member Congressman Ralph Norman on the show last night. And I proffered to him that the Tax Foundation estimated that this would actually cost around $1.5 trillion. And he said it might be even more than that. So is the truth somewhere in between? What do you think?
No, I think what they're looking at here is if we take this bill, which is a 2-year bill, and extrapolate the costs for a 10-year window, then we could be looking at much more significant costs. But the reality of the situation is this bill expires at the end of 2025. So it's a 2-year package here. And when it expires, it was intentionally done because it lines up with other expiring provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the Trump tax cuts of 2017. And there we're going to have a big knockdown, drag out fight in all likelihood. We'll see what the Congress looks like at that point. We'll see who president is at that time. But we're going to have a big fight one way or another in order to restore all provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, most notably the lower tax rates that have helped middle-class Americans and small businesses and the higher standard deduction. So this will be just another front in that large battle for lower taxes and a stronger economy.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of Republicans, including folks like Congressman Ralph Norman, Freedom Caucus, conservative fiscal hawks on the congressional side, were concerned about the sundowning of those Trump tax cuts. But on the flip side of things, with respect to the child tax credit, I think that it is a good thing to provide parents with a larger dollar amount for this. However, am I right? Is this extended to illegal immigrants?
There's no changes to the citizenship-based criteria that are in this bill. A lot of people are upset because obviously we have a problem at our southern border, and that's creating all sorts of problems across the country, really. And one of the areas where it can hurt the government is by drawing down more government programs. So I think there is a legitimate concern buried in there. But the fact of the matter is the provisions here that protect against illegal aliens claiming the child tax credit are the same as the 2017 Trump law, the exact same provisions. Those were not changed at all in this bill. So do we need an immigration bill? Do we need additional policies to deal with our southern border? Yes, but they're not addressed here. And just because this doesn't address a serious problem doesn't mean it's a good bill. We can't fix all the problems of this country with a single piece of legislation.
Wish we could, but thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Okay, what do you think the fate of this bill is now that it's over in the Senate?
Well, that's where it gets really tricky because obviously we have Chuck Schumer as the majority leader who kind of likes the bill, but also wants to add that SALT deduction that you mentioned before. This is a gift to the state legislators in Albany, in Sacramento, in Annapolis, in those high tax blue states that love to jack up taxes on their residents, and they hope that the SALT deduction will keep them from running to Texas or Arizona or Florida or wherever. As we've capped that, people have actually had to pay their fair share of taxes in their state, far too much. And instead of complaining to their legislators, hey, lower our taxes because everybody's leaving, they just shell that bill off to the federal government, essentially. So the SALT deduction just fosters really, really bad tax policies, particularly in blue states. We need to eliminate it altogether. Schumer wants to increase it. Some Republicans from California and New York want to increase it. I'd rather see it eliminated altogether. Use that money instead for lower rates, a bigger child tax credit, and more pro-growth tax policy.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have a lot bigger problems than our state and local taxes here in California and places like New York as well. So we got to get to the root of the problem before we fix it superficially. We've just got about a minute left. I wanted to ask you about all of these companies who are shedding pieces of their workforce. Here in Los Angeles, we've got the LA Times, but I just took a quick list of companies that have been firing off pieces of their workforce. UPS, Sports Illustrated, TechCrunch, PayPal, REI, Levi's, Macy's, Wayfair, the list goes on and on. Is this an indication that Bidenomics just isn't working?
Well, it's one of about 1 million indications that Bidenomics isn't working. We've seen so much data to that effect. But listen, the job market has been pretty strong over the past couple of years. It's been a little bit surprising how strong it's been. That's helped people weather the storm, at least in part, during these years of high inflation. Job markets are weakening. We see those companies laying off people, and I think there are danger signs on the horizon here that we are going to see a softer job market. How do we fix that? Well, there's no silver bullet, but this tax legislation will help that because it will encourage companies to expand, to invest in the United States of America, and to spend more money on things like innovation, research, development.
Right.
All those things are good for jobs.
Yeah. Well, look, my double stuffed Oreos have gone up by $1.30, and that's how I gauge the economy, and that does not look good for Bidenomics. Brandon, we appreciate you being here so much. Don't go anywhere, everybody. We have one of John's very own reporters joining us next from Just the News. But first, here's a quick exclusive offer from John and our friends at AMAC. Check it out. We'll be back on the other side.
Hey, America, you've built this nation, weathered challenging times, and witnessed moments of greatness. Now you're watching it fall apart. We deserve better, a fighting chance to become the great country we once were. The Association of Mature American Citizens is America's leading conservative senior advocacy organization and benefits organization. Your non-woke alternative to the AARP with 2 million members strong. It's time to take a stand and join the fight. Visit amac.us/justnews to do just that. AMAC listens to their members and voices their concerns in Washington and in state houses around the country. They're here to offer your guidance, support, and address the issues that matter most in our communities. Join AMAC today. Memberships are starting as low as $12 per year and provide you with the strength of 2 million members, as well as some exclusive benefits that can save you and me money. Americans are recognizing where they spend their dollar matters. Giving your hard-earned money to an AMAC competitor such as AARP further funds the decline of American values and promotes agendas that we the people do not support. Join me by taking action today. Join AMAC. Help save the nation. Visit amac.us/justnews to choose the right plan for you. AMAC is more than just talk. AMAC gets things done. Once again, get your membership and learning by visiting amac.us/justnews.
Welcome back. As we are right up against the end of this hour together, there is a very important story that our last guest tonight has been working on that was just published on justthenews.com that I want to bring attention to. In fact, I spoke about it on John's podcast today, so you should tune in. After all, election integrity is one of the hottest and most controversial topics ahead of the next election, and that's simply because of what we have experienced in 2020 and in these last off-year elections as well. But there is an election integrity watchdog organization that is recommending 14 reforms, best practices, their recommendations for states to improve election security, which inadvertently helps restore integrity in our election system in general. Natalia Mittelstadt is on the election beat for justthenews.com and has the latest now. Natalia, great to see you, my friend. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right. So this election integrity group, they are bipartisan because, after all, Democrats did used to care about election integrity, but they talked about these 14 reforms that states should enact in their elections Some of them I read were not necessarily something that I would think of, but some of them were literally the most obvious adjustments that people should make. Can you kind of walk us through these reforms?
Sure. So yeah, the Honest Elections Project came out with an updated report just a few days ago about what the states should do in order to shore up their elections. And specifically, the executive director, Jason Sneed, was saying that this year there are newer election integrity threats that the left is pushing, such as ranked choice voting, non-citizen voting, and foreign influence through donations. And so one of the many reforms that they listed was that states should prohibit sue and settle litigation, which is where activists would sue government officials to secure an agreement to basically ignore or rewrite an election law. And the purpose of the reform is to make sure that elected lawmakers are the ones writing election law, not courts, through these settlements. And so that was one of the biggest threats that Jason Sneed said he believes we'll see this year is these type of litigated cases.
Lordy, I hope so. And I remember that one of the provisions as well was to investigate and prosecute election crimes. But one thing, Natalia, that we learned, if anything, from the 2020 election is that it is very hard to fix anything on the backside, whether you take it to court, they're going to say, you don't have standing, or there wasn't anyone who was injured by it, or whatever the case may be. So the main thing, the message that resonated the most with me about this list is that this stuff has to happen on the front side, because on the back side, you got no recourse.
Yep, yeah, that's very true, as we've seen with the many election lawsuits since 2020, some still ongoing even from 2022. That's a lot harder to win it through the courts.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to switch gears to another story that you have been following. Oregon GOP state senators who staged a walkout over abortion, they cannot run for re-election, according to the Supreme Court. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So what happened was that the Oregon Supreme Court ruled that 10 Republican state senators won't be able to run for re-election because they participated in a 6-week-long quorum-denying walkout last year. Basically, the court decided to side with the Secretary of State after, in 2022, voters had approved of a measure that amended the state constitution, basically saying that lawmakers couldn't have more than 10 unexcused absences if they want to run again. So that is what happened in that case.
So they didn't do anything illegal. It was just contrary to the rules of their governing body, right?
Well, basically the voters had passed a new constitutional amendment in 2022. Yeah. So basically this now says that, well, if you have more than 10 unexcused absences, you can't run for re-election, which seems like a very particular amendment. But apparently there had been a few walkouts before from 2019 to 2021. So they had this happen repeatedly.
Yeah, I think that's called addressing the problem directly. It sounds like they did just that. And Natalia, we are 9-10 months away from an election, and I am still not convinced that much has been done with respect to clean elections, cleaning voter rolls, all of the provisions that were recommended in this package. Are you confident that the 2024 election is going to be fairly integrous?
Well, there are some states that have made progress, and then there are many other states that haven't. So there's some with, Georgia and others that have passed or are working on more election integrity laws, whether it's voter ID or securing mail-in ballots and things like that. But then you have others, such as New York and California, that have more lenient laws, or Michigan, where they just passed something similar to the H.R. 1 bill to expand other issues that we've seen before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see how it works out, but there's definitely a lot of work to still be done.
Yeah, it's interesting. The states that you said did clean up their elections were Republican states, and the states that don't care were Democrats. That's just uncanny. That can't be right. Oh, but I think it is. Natalia, great story. I encourage everyone to go over to justthenews.com and read that article, among many others that feature your byline. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. That is the end of the night. That is it for us. Head over or stay tuned. Grant Stinchfield is going to